Before we get started, I just want to say thank you to each and every one of you for helping me reach 500 subscribers on this channel. Your support means so much to me, and I am honored that my videos have resonated with so many people. I'm really bad at this kind of thing, so I'll just end it there, but I just wanted to say thank you so much for helping me reach this milestone. Now on to the video. Hello and welcome to the arcade. You know, it feels like it wasn't really that far back that I talked about my top 10 favorite games here on this channel. At the same time though, that was before I became a From Software fanboy and beat Dark Souls 3, Dark Souls 1, and Bloodborne. A few things have changed since that video, and while I do plan on doing an updated version of my top 10 favorite games of all time, today I'd like to do something a little different. Today I'd like to tell you about my top 5 favorite handheld video games of all time and talk about some of the unique charm that handheld gaming can offer. So here we go, here are my top 5 favorite handheld games and why I think handheld gaming is so great.
I've done a lot of handheld gaming in my time, starting with the very first video game console that I ever bought with my own money, the original Game Boy Advance. My twin brother and my sister and I saved up our allowance for what felt like forever. We pooled our money together, and in the summer of 2002, we bought a Game Boy Advance with 2 games, Midway Arcade Hits and The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past. We had an absolute blast swapping the GBA around, taking turns on Joust, Robotron 2084, and of course, A Link to the Past. At one point, all 3 of us had a different save file on the game, and I remember being so determined to catch up to my brother and to stay ahead of my sister, at least for a while. But before too long, I got bit by the Robotron 2084 bug and just could not put that game down. I wasn't that good at the game, but it was just so much fun, and I was so addicted to it that I didn't care that I was dying over and over and only increasing my high score ever so slightly each time. The game just has this smoothness and satisfying sound to it all, with of course some fantastic visuals and lightning fast arcade action that I love so much. After a few years of gaming on the GBA, playing games like Star Wars Trilogy, Dave Mirra BMX, ATV Quad Power Racing, and Spider-Man 2, I was itching for something a little more real. Not that those games didn't have their charm, but once my best friend let me borrow Golden Sun, I knew there was no going back to ATV and BMX games. Sorry, Dave. Golden Sun was my introduction to Camelot, a developer that has a long and illustrious history developing for Nintendo. They not only made Hot Shots Golf and all the Golden Sun games, but they also made and still make most of the Mario sports games. Mario Golf and Mario Tennis for the Game Boy Color and N64, Mario Golf Toadstool Tour, Mario Power Tennis, Mario Golf Super Rush, and Mario Tennis Aces. These are all mostly fantastic games, with exciting gameplay, great graphics, and really fun modes that make for good party games. But by far my favorite game that they have ever developed, and one that has shaped my taste in video games is number 5, Mario Tennis Power Tour. This game came out in 2005, but I actually didn't play it until 2014 when it released on the Wii U eShop. It was the first way I played the game and the first way I beat it, but I did eventually buy a physical copy for my GBA, but I just really loved playing on that Wii U gamepad. That thing was perfect for GBA games. I also played Golden Sun that way, Mario Kart Super Circuit, and a few other GBA games. Mario Tennis Power Tour really surprised me with its storyline and its depth of character customization. It's such a great combination of genres. You get all the best parts of a tennis game with RPG mechanics and RPG storyline thrown in there on top of that. So when the game starts out, you play as either a boy or a girl who goes to the Royal Tennis Academy. And then the goal of the game is to work your way all the way up to become the tennis champion by playing through the various tournaments. It is first and foremost a tennis game with standard tennis gameplay, but with the added RPG elements of character interaction and exploration, and of course, upgrades. So you play matches to get experience points to level up your character and progress the storyline. This blend of tennis action and RPG elements is such a unique concept that really hadn't been done to this level and hasn't been done again until I think Golf Story in 2017. The game not only has the awesome story mode, but also has standard single-player modes with exhibitions and minigames. So the game begins with the main character waking up at the Royal Tennis Academy, where their doubles partner informs them that they've enrolled and passed out during the welcome workout. Then at breakfast, they learn that the mysterious masked challengers have defeated the Academy's top students, including Alex, the top-ranked player. Determined to uncover the masked players' identities, the protagonist aims to become the top-ranked player and enters the main tournament, the Island Open. After defeating all classes and winning the Island Open, they still haven't identified the masked players. The next day, Alex leads them to a secret airport where they meet Mario, implied to be one of the masked players, and travel to Peach's Kingdom for the Peach Tournament. Once you win this tournament, this ends the doubles side of the game. You then become the school's singles champion, winning the Island Open again and return to the Mushroom Kingdom for another Peach Tournament, and then the story mode is over. On top of a fun story, the game has really impressive visuals for the Game Boy Advance. A lot of the models look similar to Golden Sun, which in my opinion probably has the best graphics on that handheld. They have this pre-rendered 3D model look to them that makes them really pop off the screen. I also love the visual effects that you see on court to indicate the type of spin on the ball and where to stand when making your next shot. If you want to just cruise through the main story of this game and not do too much else, you can probably finish the game in like 6 to 8 hours. But being a tennis game on top of having an RPG story mode makes it so this game has tons of replayability. Anytime you want to jump in for just a few quick tennis matches, you can do that here. And it's just as solid as a tennis game as it is an RPG. And that's the main reason why this game is one of my favorites. Normally, when a game tries to do too many things, it feels incomplete in all the different aspects. But with Power Tour, it truly feels like a full-fledged RPG and a fully realized tennis game all in one. I think Camelot did a fantastic job showing off both their main strengths, fun sports games and engaging RPG stories. This game is a fantastic time, and probably still a hidden gem to the general gaming public. So I mentioned earlier that my best friend let me borrow Golden Sun, and that really isn't telling the whole story. Reed has always been willing and eager to share games with me and my brother, and it's something that I will always be grateful for. He introduced us to Super Smash Bros. Melee, the Pokémon franchise. Heck, the first time I ever played the Wii was at his house. But before all of that, the very first game I can ever recall playing at his house was an old game he had received as a hand-me-down from his older brother. His brother had recently upgraded to a Game Boy Color, so he gave Reed his original Game Boy and a handful of games. And among those games was none other than number 4, Super Mario Land. I feel like a lot of people my age have had this same experience. I remember being just absolutely blown away that I could play an actual, real-life video game on something that I could hold in my hands. I had only ever imagined that something like that would be possible, and the novelty of that moment still has not worn off. And what a game to be my first introduction to handheld gaming. Super Mario Land was developed by Nintendo R&D 1 and released for the original Game Boy in 1989. So yeah, the first time I played it was at Reed's house on his hand-me-down Game Boy, but it wasn't until years later that I finally got a copy for myself. In my opinion, this game is the reason why we have so many of the great handheld games from Nintendo today. Without this game acting as the pioneer for moving Mario to the handheld space, we probably never would have gotten great games like New Super Mario Bros. And Super Mario 3D Land. This game showed off what handheld gaming could do. It may not be the best handheld Mario game, or even the best one on the Game Boy, but its old school charm, excellent level design, and fantastic music and sound effects make it my personal favorite. Not a ton is changed here from the original Super Mario Bros., although Mario does feel a little more stiff to control. And for some reason you drop like a brick if you walk off the edge of a platform instead of jumping. But for the most part, this is pretty much like playing the original Super Mario Bros., but portably. We have the same running, jumping, smashing enemies by jumping on them or shooting them. but we do have some switch-ups as well. This game has levels where you pilot either a submarine or an airplane in an auto-scrolling, side-scrolling shooter mode where you blast bad guys and blocks to make it to the boss fight at the end. It also features the Super Ball instead of the Fire Flower, so it takes a little bit more precision to shoot enemies, but you do have a better chance at hitting flying enemies with this weapon. I feel like there's a lot here that never passed on to future Mario games, at least in terms of these features, and it makes this game feel so strange, but in a good way. For characters, we of course have Mario as our protagonist, and he is rescuing a princess, but this time it's Princess Daisy, making her Mario Bros. Series debut. And the main antagonist is not Bowser or King Koopa, but Tatonga, an alien that flies around in a spaceship. In terms of visuals, there is a lot left to the imagination. Mario looks like Mario, but the backgrounds of the worlds are monochromatic and more empty than you typically expect in the Mario series. But being the first handheld entry, we can forgive it for that. There's still a lot of artistry here, especially when you consider the limitations of the Game Boy that these developers and artists were working with. The enemies all look great, and while the backgrounds can be lacking in some areas, I think they look pretty good in the opening level and the underwater level. And that soundtrack. Wow, talk about iconic. And for a game that most fans of the series probably haven't played or have no interest in playing, that theme is certainly one of the more recognizable of the whole series. All of the sound effects are fantastic as well, adding to that satisfying feeling you get when playing really any of the 2D Mario platformers. This game only has 12 levels spread across 4 worlds. And you can get through the whole thing in about 45 minutes, give or take. It's not a long game or a very challenging game, but what it lacks in those departments is more than made up for in the sheer amount of charm and simple fun that you get in those brief 12 levels. I mentioned the Super Ball power-up, but there's also the Power Stars that make you invincible, and at the end of each level, you have the chance to climb or platform your way up to the door at the top of the screen. If you use that one instead of the bottom one, you get the chance to earn some extra lives or a power-up to help you on the next level. As far as content goes, this game just has the one mode, but it also does have a scoreboard to track the highest score, if that matters to anyone. This game is one of my favorites in the whole Mario franchise, mainly for just how unique it is and how impressive it is for being the first in the series to come to handheld systems. I've talked about this game before in my short games video, so I won't repeat myself too much, but I just think that the game is not only great as a solid handheld game, but really as a solid entry in the Mario franchise. Now, I've got one more story about Reed, and then I'll stop gushing, I swear. I mentioned twice now how many different games, systems, and franchises that my brother and I were introduced to because of our best friend. Now, what I think was the second game I ever saw on the original Game Boy was Pokémon Blue, that he was playing one day after we met up at his house after school. He tried to show and explain to me how the game worked, but I saw a bunch of menus and selections you had to make and was immediately intimidated by the complexity. Come on guys, I was like 8 years old at the time. I was definitely interested in Pokemon, but mostly because all my friends were, and for me, especially at that age, what I really cared about were the games that gave me the most amount of immediate feedback or instant gratification. Games like Super Mario were awesome, but games where you had to explore a lot like Zelda or make tough decisions like Pokemon, those just didn't have the same appeal to me. But in April of 2007, something changed. That year, my brother, my best friend, and I all bought the first Pokemon game to launch for the Nintendo DS. And it was the first time that we all got the same Pokemon together at the same time. My brother got Pokemon Pearl, but Reed and I got number 3, Pokemon Diamond. In April of 2007, Game Freak released the first iterations of the 4th generation of core Pokemon games, Diamond and Pearl, for the Nintendo DS. My brother and my best friend and I all got our copies on day 1 of release, and we each picked a different starter. My brother chose Turtwig, Reed chose Piplup, and I chose Chimchar. I became immediately attached to not only the game, but my starter Pokemon and my original team of 6. This really was the first Pokemon game that I would say I really played. I may have tried a battle or two in Pokemon Blue, but I didn't really get into a Pokemon game until Diamond. You're probably already familiar with how Pokemon works, but just in case you're not, in the game you collect and battle creatures known as Pokemon, using their unique skills and attacks to take down wild Pokemon or Pokemon from rival Pokemon trainers. In a battle, you and your opponent take turns commanding your Pokemon on what actions to perform. That can be an attack, a type of defense or stat boost, or to rest and return to their Pokeball. Pokemon Diamond and Pearl were the first games of the series to feature dual-type starters. Infernape, the full evolution of Chimchar, is a fire fighting type, which allows for an awesome combination of moves to use. Diamond and Pearl were also the first games in the series to have online Pokemon trades and battles via Wi-Fi, which was a huge leap forward for the franchise. In the game, you get sent by Professor Rowan to travel across the Sinnoh region to complete your Pokédex and become the Pokemon Trainer Champion. You encounter the villainous Team Galactic and have to defeat their members in the gyms in order to become the champion. After defeating the last gym leader who summons Dialga, the flagship Pokemon of Diamond, you either defeat or capture Dialga, then the game is pretty much over, although there are a few other things you can do later on. In the visuals department, this game has a pretty unique style. While the characters and Pokemon still have that 2D sprite look to them, the environments all look very three-dimensional, making for a cool, kind of cartoonish look to the game. Almost like an early iteration of the HD 2D style that we see a lot of games doing these days. During the battles, the Pokemon are pretty well animated, and the effects of some of the attacks are really impressive. The soundtrack overall never stuck out to me except for the main battle theme, which I think is actually one of the best in the whole series. That theme does a great job at capturing the essence of Pokemon, which is mostly kind of fantastical and whimsical, but also conveying an epic sense of danger and importance. My first playthrough of Pokemon Diamond took me about 65 hours, but I'd bet you could beat it a lot faster than that if you just focus on the main storyline. There's a lot of extra stuff to do, obviously, like exploring, trading, finding and catching rare Pokemon, and exploring all the caves to find all the different TMs and HMs, and stuff like that. Pokemon Diamond was my first true experience with the series. I did go on to play Black, Black 2, and Pokemon Y, but aside from a few highlights in Pokemon Black, I never quite experienced anything like my first playthrough of Pokemon Diamond. There must be something about your first Pokemon game that really sticks with you. Like how Souls players say your first Souls game is always your favorite. There's definitely some truth to that saying. I have so many great memories of playing Pokemon Diamond on car trips, rainy summer days, and even during vacations when I should have been outside playing. But it was just so much fun and so addicting that I have absolutely no regrets for all the hours I spent on this game. It was a real bonding experience for me and Reed too, and my brother as well, because it was the first time that all three of us were able to trade Pokemon. Well, mostly it was him giving me rare and powerful Pokemon basically for free, but hey. Now, so far, all of my picks, and no spoilers, but my number one as well, have been games that I discovered and played mostly in my childhood. But in 2022, I discovered a game that I was surprised I had not heard of before. A game from a beloved and highly acclaimed franchise. A game from a series that I had played at least half a dozen games from, The Legend of Zelda. But my history with the series goes back to, of course, playing A Link to the Past and Four Swords on GBA. And then after that, I played some Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask at Reed's house. And in 2006 for Christmas, I asked my dad for an NES, and he got me a bundle from eBay that included The Legend of Zelda 1 and 2. I also had Twilight Princess for the Wii and Wind Waker HD for the Wii U. I'm pretty sure the only ones I actually finished out of all of those were A Link to the Past and Wind Waker. Those two were really the only ones that I could stick with for some reason. I love the classic feel of A Link to the Past with its grand scope and epic story and beautiful music. And I love the unique art style and graphics of the Wind Waker, plus its setting and the use of the sailing system were things that added to how big and mysterious that game world felt. And then one day in April of 2022, just shortly after Nintendo announced that they were going to remove the ability to purchase games via credit card on the 3DS eShop, I was browsing the Game Boy section in the eShop and stumbled across number 2, The Legend of Zelda: Link's Awakening. I honestly can't remember ever hearing of this game before, which is shocking because it's not like a hidden gem or anything. It may not be the highest selling Zelda game or anything like that, but it's certainly not a sleeper hit. Anyway, I was about a day or two out from taking my family on a camping trip, so I figured I'd buy a couple of Game Boy games for my 3DS to play while we were out camping. I picked up Super Mario Land, of course, and Link's Awakening DX. Partly because they were at a great price, but also because I just have this strong nostalgic connection to the Game Boy, I guess. So I tried out both games, but didn't really play much of Link's Awakening at first. But later that year, I started it up again, and wow, that was probably the fastest I've ever played through any Zelda game. The gameplay was rock solid as always, but something about Koholint Island and the unique charm of this game had me addicted from start to finish. I even got a copy of the remake that Nintendo released for the Switch, and I got The Legend of Zelda Game & Watch and played it on that thing too. There is just something so special about Link's Awakening. So the original version of the game came out in 1993 for the original Game Boy, but the DX version came out for the Game Boy Color in 1998. And after that, we got the DX version re-released on the Nintendo 3DS eShop in 2011, and finally the full remake on Nintendo Switch in 2019. Mechanically, the game is probably most similar to A Link to the Past, with a few additions like the Rock Feather. All the 2D Zelda games are action-oriented adventure and puzzle games, with some very light RPG elements in there, such as the ability to get upgraded items, weapons, and shields. You explore the island, use your sword and other weapons to attack enemies, use your shield to block, use items to navigate, and try to solve puzzles that you find inside the caves and dungeons throughout the world. Aside from the Rock's Feather, there were also a lot of other things that made this game stand out from other games in the series. First of all, the setting of Koholint Island. It can sometimes feel similar to Hyrule in some respects, but it definitely has more of a beachy or tropical theme to it. There's also a handful of references to other Nintendo IPs in this game, like the Goombas and the Chain Chomp, and there's even a Yoshi doll that you can win in one of the mini-games. In the start of the game, Link awakens on Koholint Island and is told by a mysterious owl that he must wake the Windfish in order to leave the island and return home. Of course, to do this, you have to talk to all the characters throughout the island and solve the different puzzles and defeat the bosses in each of the 8 different dungeons. Each dungeon contains a different instrument that will be a vital part of waking the Windfish. Once you have them all, you climb to the top of the volcano where the egg is stuck, and I won't spoil anything that happens next. This game is also absolutely filled with crazy and quirky characters. Everyone from Mario, Terran, to Syrup the Witch, to Mr. Right, and to the Windfish itself, there is so much charm and creativity just oozing from these characters. Also, a really nice and more classic feeling inclusion is Marin, the, love interest for Link, a girl who wants to become a seagull so she can fly away from the island forever. She sings the ballad of the Windfish and adds a layer of depth to the immersion and lore of Koholint Island, and she accompanies Link throughout a lot of the adventure and some major plot points. No matter what version of this game you play, it is an absolute joy to look at. The sprite work and character designs of the original are the absolute best that the original Game Boy has to offer. And in the DX version we get an added color palette, plus just a general enhancement of sharpness to the sprites and smoothness to the gameplay, or at least to me it feels that way. And the diorama style of the Switch remake is one of the best and most unique looking games on the Switch, heck, even just in general. The Switch version does suffer from significant frame drops sometimes, which is a huge bummer, because when it is running at a solid 60 frames per second, there is really nothing like it. And just like with Super Mario Land, Link's Awakening, while not being one of the biggest sellers in the Zelda franchise, has some of the most iconic music from the whole series. The Mabe village theme portrays a sense of innocence and adventure, and the Ballad of the Windfish is not only a great theme of the series, but also an important piece of the game's plot, and has a beautiful sadness and longing to it. And it's impossible to forget the stranger tracks like the Wise Owl theme, the mysterious cave theme, and the track that plays in the shop. When I first played this game, I put it down after about 30 minutes or so. I knew pretty much right away that it was going to take a bit of dedication to get through, and I had other games I was a little more focused on. But once I finally got around to it, like I said earlier, it was probably the fastest I have ever played through a Zelda game. I just could not put it down. I beat the DX version on my 3DS first, then I played through the Switch remake. Lately, I've been hopping between the OG version on my Game & Watch and the DX HD version on PC. But no matter how you decide to play this game, every single version contains the greatness that you'd expect from a classic 2D Zelda adventure. You cannot go wrong no matter which one you choose. I would say though that the hardest version is the original one on the original hardware, and the easiest way to play is definitely the Switch remake. Not that the difficulty has been reduced by anything to do with puzzles or enemies, just by the fact that it's easier to see and control everything in the newer version. Now the question is, which one is my favorite version to play? And honestly, it's gotta be the DX version for Game Boy Color on the 3DS. The Switch version is beautiful with a unique art style and definitely super convenient to have a better control scheme. And the original version is full of old school charm. And the DX HD version on PC is amazing, but it's not really how the developers intended for the game to look or play. But the Game Boy Color version is just absolutely legendary for the updated color, improved sprite and background detail, added dungeon, bug fixes, and other minor changes. Like I said, there's really no wrong way to play this game, it's just that DX happens to be my favorite. If you want the most definitive and convenient version of the game, play the Switch version. If you want the most authentic and nostalgic, play DX. And now, it's time to talk about my number one pick. In the summer of 2006, I discovered Monster Hunter at a point of great transition in my life. I was truly grateful to discover such an amazing game that I could just get lost in for a couple hours every day, just to forget some of the stressful things that I wasn't able to fully process at the time. It was nothing too crazy going on, or too stressful, or too hard, or anything like that, but still, having that game to escape into, and those fond memories of playing it are something I truly treasure. And I've said this before, but my true love for Monster Hunter developed a little later down the line with the release of Monster Hunter 3 in 2009. That game had me addicted like almost nothing else before, and I played endless hours of it, both solo and with my best friend. And then in the spring of 2013, I bought number 1, Monster Hunter 3 Ultimate. Once again, the Monster Hunter series became an escape for me. In 2013, I was working part-time and going to college, trying to balance a lot of different things in life, while also trying to prepare for the future. And Monster Hunter 3 Ultimate was my little home away from home when I needed to unwind after a stressful day. For those who don't know, Monster Hunter 3 Ultimate was developed by Capcom for the 3DS and released in the US in 2013. I didn't pre-order the game, but I did buy a copy from GameStop on launch day. It had been a while since my last playthrough of Monster Hunter 3 on the Wii, and I was ready to jump back into Moga Village and start the journey all over again. And what a journey it was. Not only do you get the iconic locations and monsters from Monster Hunter 3, you also get upgraded graphics, G-rank quests, more weapon types, more monsters and monster variations, and even new locations. It has that nostalgic feel of Monster Hunter 3, while also feeling like a brand new game on its own. I'd say in terms of new content alone, you're looking at an increase of at least 15 hours just to get to the credits. But if you want to do everything that the Ultimate version has to offer, you're looking at more than 500 hours of gameplay. I mostly played this game in the mornings right after waking up, even before getting out of bed. And of course, at the end of the day, I'd fall asleep while playing it. Monster Hunter 3 Ultimate for me was the perfect game for me to play at that time because it retained everything that made Monster Hunter 3 so great while adding so much to the game, and just the fact that it was available on a handheld console was a pretty magical thing. So if you're not familiar with the series, Monster Hunter 3 Ultimate is an action game focused around hunting monsters to get materials to craft new weapons and armor that will help you to beat new monsters to then get new materials to make newer weapons and armor. This process pretty much repeats with bigger and badder monsters until you get to the end. It goes like this: hunt monsters, gather materials, and craft better gear to take on even tougher monsters. Of course, there are some different types of quests thrown in there too. Gathering resources by foraging, mining, and fishing is a big part of this game, and something that makes this series special in my opinion. It gives you a feeling of connection to the flora and the fauna of the world, and really helps to boost the immersion. And this all works really well here in Monster Hunter 3 Ultimate. And the game really gives you a huge amount of freedom. On top of the huge amount and wide variety of monsters, there's also a pretty big selection of weapons, armor, and decorations that will determine your playstyle. And the movesets for each weapon are so expansive that you often see players using the same weapon type as each other, but having a completely different approach to hunting. The same cannot really be said for a lot of other action games and franchises out there, which is just another one of the many things that makes Monster Hunter so great. The story of the game is pretty simple and really just the catalyst to propel you right into the action. So you play as a hunter who arrives at Moga Village and quickly begins an investigation into strange earthquakes that are affecting the entire island. The first milestone is the flagship monster Lagiacrus. But right after you beat him, you realize that he wasn't the cause of the earthquakes, and was pretty much just as scared as everyone else. What he was scared of was Cedius, a colossal elder dragon that lives in the depths of the ocean below Moga. So you prepare and finally take him down in one of the most unique final bosses the Monster Hunter series has ever seen, and it is quite epic. Not only is this game a huge upgrade in the visuals department from Monster Hunter 3, but it is actually one of the best looking games on the 3DS in general. Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate probably edges it out slightly, but they are both pretty similar. It is still stunning to see a game that looks this good and running this smoothly playing on my original red 3DS. And just as good as the graphics is the soundtrack. The multiple themes of Moga Village are all expertly crafted to give you that feeling that you're floating on a village out in the sea, and all the monster themes are some of the most memorable in the whole series. They may not have the large orchestral arrangements from later games like Iceborne, but they have a really distinct voice that adds so much to the identity of this game. It's not hard to love something that feels so natural and makes the whole experience that much more cohesive. I mentioned earlier that the game adds around 15 hours or so to the base game of Monster Hunter 3, which would put it at about 75 hours to experience everything in the single player mode. That ranges from the tutorial missions at the beginning, which admittedly are a bit of a slog, to the gathering quests, to small monster battles, large monster battles, and to special hunts that include the Gen Moran and the Cedius. A lot of time is also spent in preparation for fights with large monsters, which is typical for a game in this series. Hunts can last up to 50 minutes, and sometimes they will take you that long, so you really want to make sure you're as prepared as you can be so you can avoid having to replay hunts as much as possible. The main content of the game is broken down into quests, and quests are broken down into three main categories. First is the village quests. Village quests start out relatively easy and are more designed to get you used to how the game works and how the monsters behave and how all the different weapons and other systems function. And the village quests are pretty much what gets you through the main storyline of the game. Getting through all of the required village quests probably won't take you more than 40 hours or so. But then you have the guild quests. These are typically a lot harder than anything you'll face in the village quests. They're all designed to be tackled in multiplayer with a party of up to 4 hunters, but it is possible to solo these quests as well. Guild quests are sorted between low rank and high rank and will probably take you another 50 to 75 hours to get through, depending on how good you are and if you're going solo or not. And then there's the event quests. But to be honest, I don't think you can get these now unless you already had them before the 3DS online and multiplayer servers shut down, which is a shame because there was so much great content there. I guess you probably can't play online multiplayer either now that I think about it. But I never really played Monster Hunter 3 Ultimate for the multiplayer. I played it to be immersed in the world of Monster Hunter, and that's exactly what that game did for me. At the time it released, it was the definitive Monster Hunter experience in my opinion, and still holds up as one of the best and my personal favorite 3DS game of all time. It has challenging and addicting gameplay, gorgeous graphics and music, an immersive atmosphere, and plenty of content to keep you engaged for hundreds of hours if you choose to immerse yourself fully into the game. It is by far my favorite handheld video game of all time and an excellent entry into an iconic franchise.
So that's my list. Those are my top 5 favorite handheld games of all time. Mario Tennis Power Tour, Super Mario Land, Pokémon Diamond, The Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening, and Monster Hunter 3 Ultimate. There are so many more games I could have included from the DS, from the PSP, from the Game Boy Advance, but including all those would have made this video way too long. Plus, the PSP still needs its own video, so maybe look forward to that one in the future. Anyways, I just feel like these are the 5 games that had the biggest impact on me. Not only in terms of how much I played them, but how they shaped my taste and opened up my eyes to the possibilities of what handheld gaming can really do. And now I would love to hear from you. What are your top 5 favorite handheld games of all time? Were you surprised by any of my picks, or do we share any of the same favorites? Let me know, and until next time, thank you so much for watching.